Letters from Roger Freeman to President Ronald Reagan reveal the real origin of the student debt crisis. Hello guys, and welcome to another episode of Thinking Out Loud. Today we're going to be talking about the student debt crisis, its origins, and its escalation over the last several decades. Recently, the Intercept released this article here. Says the origin of student debt, Reagan advisor warned free college would create a dangerous, educated proletariat. Now, this article is obviously coming out in the wake of President Joe Biden canceling a minimal amount of student loan debt. It looks like Joe Biden has agreed to wipe away $10,000 of student loan debt for certain individuals with certain income requirements for the family, for the individual, things like that. This has been, hailed by Democrats, by liberals as being, a huge step. $10,000 wiped away for a certain number of people with certain brackets. But as I'm sure most of you watching this channel know, this amount of debt comes with all these stipulations. Apparently, there's a mountain of paperwork you have to go through, bureaucracy, in order to get it canceled. If you get it canceled, doesn't matter how much you owe. You could owe $100,000, $200,000, whatever. All you're going to get is that $10,000. And as we've seen with some of the statistics, this amounts to, let's say, everybody who does file the paperwork, go through the process to eliminate their $10,000 in student loan debt. It looks like the student loan debt bubble went from about 1.7 to 1.9 trillion to what, like 1.5 trillion now. So really, at the end of the day, you have liberals hailing this as this great thing, but those of us, living on the ground, living the life of being working class in debt with our student loan debt, our car debt, our credit card debt, our mortgage debt, if we're lucky enough to own a house, realize that this is nothing. It amounts to nothing, right? We still have this massive debt bubble of $1.5 trillion that's, holding us back from making, investments maybe in a new car, in a home. And it's holding us back from consuming the goods and services that we need and deserve, which in turn is also affecting the economy. And we'll get into that more later. So we're going into this article here that was released from the Intercept that kind of analyzes the origins of the student debt crisis and how it started and how we got to now, right? So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this, do a little bit of reading, and then we'll try to break down some analysis. It says here, the origin of student debt. Reagan advisor warned free college would create a dangerous, quote-unquote, educated proletariat. In 1970, Roger Freeman, who also worked for Nixon, revealed the right's motivations for coming decades of attacks on higher education. Says, with the vociferous debate over President Joe Biden's announcement that the federal government will cancel a portion of outstanding student debt, it's important to understand how Americans came to owe the current cumulative total of more than $1.6 trillion for higher education. In 1970, Ronald Reagan was running for re-election as governor of California. He had first won in 1966 with confrontational rhetoric towards the University of California public college system and executed confrontational policies when in office. In May of 1970, Reagan had shut down all 28 UC and Cal State campuses in the midst of student protests against the Vietnam War and the U.S. bombing of Cambodia. On October 29th, less than a week before the election, his education advisor, Roger A. Freeman, spoke at a press conference to defend him. So let's put a little bit of a historical backdrop here. When it's talking about this educated proletariat, Roger Freeman said having this free college where anyone and everyone, every Tom, Dick, and Harry can get a college education is creating this dangerously educated proletariat. So the backdrop to this is the Vietnam War, the 1960s and 70s cultural revolutions that's going on. You have all kinds of student protests across the country, including large organizations, which is, let's see if I remember the exact name of it. What is it? The Students for a Democratic Society Association or whatever. One of the biggest student organizations, student leftist organizations that this country has ever seen, maybe even throughout the world, right? So you have all these student protests going on, students shutting down their campuses, just putting a real gear into the works. And this is the sort of climate that we see Reagan and Freeman here, these students protesting the war, pushing a large and more militant or more dedicated peace movement. We see these two guys, Reagan and Freeman, asking the question, what the fuck are we supposed to do about these dumb kids? What the fuck are we supposed to do about these hippies, right? And so this is where this discussion between these two starts, right? They start talking about how can we shut this down? How can we get these, more militant working people turned from working class families? How can we get them out of these campuses? How can we shut this down? Before we go into the reading here too, I want to touch on a couple of things. Just going back to, I want to make a quick statement about this because I think it's important. With Biden canceling this small amount of student debt, obviously, we've talked about how it's not nearly enough. It doesn't do anything to solve this looming debt bubble that we know is going to pop at some point. When it does pop, it's going to be, realistically, it could be just as bad as the 2008 financial crash, given that you have all these other debt bubbles growing alongside it. I mean, it's real cataclysmic. But in the wake of him canceling this small amount of student loan debt, we've seen obviously Republicans and right-wingers and just general reactionary people talking about how are we going to pay for this? And if that is an example of the absolute stupidity amongst the right, I don't know what else is. I mean, there's enough reasons as to why the right is absolutely brain dead. We don't need to get into another one, but I think it's important. They think somehow tax dollars are going to pay for this. And it just shows that they don't, and it's funny because they're always the ones that are like, you don't understand basic economics, fucking dope. It's like, bro, you don't, okay? Because one, it's debt owed to the federal government, sometimes through private financial corporations as a subsidiary that's managing the accounts for the federal government. It's debt. It's not real, okay? You got the education in the past. The education was free in the fucking first place. So it's a debt that you owe to the federal government for getting an education. Okay, it's not real. It's numbers on a fucking screen, okay, that say that you owe this much money. And furthermore, if you knew anything about this issue, you'd understand that most or a lot of people that have been paying their student loans, they've been paying them for fucking decades, but because the interest rates are so high and it's a literal racket meant to keep you in debt forever, they've paid sometimes 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, even more than that what they originally borrowed. So not only have they paid back what they've borrowed, they've paid back an exorbitant or a usury rate of interest. They've paid back huge sums of money that they shouldn't have even owed in the first place. Right, and furthermore, if you think tax dollars are going to pay for anything, I mean, you see this same argument with obviously education, with healthcare, with school lunch, with infrastructure. Is a constant excuse. How are we going to pay for it? I mean, that's where modern monetary theory comes in. You know what I mean? We have the petrodollar in the U.S. Okay, and what the petrodollar is that Saudi Arabia agreed to have all of its oil paid for that it exports and sells to other countries paid for in dollars, okay? Which means every country all around the world has to buy huge amounts of reserve American dollars in order to buy oil. And then that has a compounding effect where because everybody's already buying these huge amount of American dollars in order to buy the oil that they need to run their fucking countries, they end up just buying even more or trading even more American dollars and doing all the trade for every single fucking transaction ever in the global economy with American dollars. So what does that mean? That means that the value of the American dollar is artificially inflated. Okay? Because people are constantly buying it, which makes the value of it go up, right? Which is why we're able to debt spend to pay for all our overseas wars and military bases and empire. It doesn't cost us anything. We can borrow and borrow and borrow and borrow and borrow. And no one's ever going to call to collect because they have to keep buying the American dollars to buy fucking anything on the global stage. Okay? So we could deficit spend Medicare. We could deficit spend rebuilding every square fucking centimeter of telecommunications and roads and bridges in this country. We could debt spend all of this shit. Every single thing that needs to be done in this country, no fucking problem. Just the way we do with war, and nobody says shit about fucking inflation or the debt or any of it. Okay? That's how this works. So, no, you don't understand about debt economics. You don't understand about basic economics, man. All right, guys, let's do some more reading here. It says, Freeman's remarks were reported the next day in the San Francisco Chronicle under the headline, Professor Sees Peril in Education, quote unquote. According to the Chronicle article, Freeman said, "We are in danger of producing an educated proletariat. That's dynamite, exclamation point. We have to be selective on who we allow to go to college." I mean, I think we already all knew that, but to see it in writing like that, it's pretty fucked up. And guess what? Your kids ain't the ones being selected to go to college. All right. If not, Freeman continued, we will have a large number of highly trained and unemployed people. Freeman also said, taking a highly idiosyncratic perspective on the cause of fascism. That's what happened in Germany. I saw it happen. So a few things here with this one, guys. He says, we are in danger of producing an educated proletariat. That's dynamite. An educated proletariat in a democracy. We live in a democracy, right? Aren't we supposed to be highly educated citizens living in a democracy so that we can elect our representatives to properly govern the country? Isn't that like the whole fucking premise of democracy, of republicanism, of society? To have well-educated populations so that they can properly govern themselves. Isn't that what the founding fathers were about? Wasn't one of the first laws that the founding fathers passed to create school districts where they allocated 1 square mile in each township be dedicated to public education? Isn't that the whole premise of democracy? Having educated people make decisions, right? And furthermore, why would you be worried about why would an educated proletariat be dynamite, man? If the society is a democracy and a republic where we're making our own decisions and ruling ourselves, government for the people, by the people, what would we have to be dynamite about? Are we somehow not making the decisions ourselves by electing people? Is somebody somehow doing the elections and choosing the people that run shit for us? Is someone running the shit behind the scenes that we don't know about? And maybe we'd be upset about it because we're educated enough to figure it out and therefore be dynamite? Is that what's going on? It couldn't be that, right? Because this is the greatest of democracy. This is the most important republic in human fucking history. Couldn't be that, right? Couldn't be that. Another thing I want to talk about here in this too is the part of that quote as well. It says, we have to be selective on who we allow to go to college. Who is it that they want to select to go to college? It's not people studying the humanities. It's not people studying actual American history. It's not people studying branches of economics that say that it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game where corporations and oligarchy dominate everybody else. Economics can be done for and by the people, right? It's not working class Joe Schmo who's a welder or a grocery clerk whose kids get to go to college. That's not who gets to go to college. Who gets to go to college is the children, both the near and distant family members of the ruling class. And beyond just them, those ones that are going to the bigwig schools, the Yales and all that beautiful fucking shit, right? The Ivy League crap. It's people a little lower on the total pole, the higher middle class, the higher to upper middle class, right? Or the lower echelon of the upper class that goes into school not to learn about the world, not to be an educated citizen in a democracy, but goes in to get specialized training to be what I believe Chris Hedges said in an interview once, complex system managers, right? Technicians, and this is a lot of what we've seen now where I think Harvard's #1 degree that they're pushing out is business management. And I think you're seeing a similar trend amongst all kinds of universities and things like that. It's no longer the humanities. It's no longer even law, which is already, you could make a case being an issue of itself. People going to study law and study business, but it's business management or it's tech. And that's because, I mean, that's purposeful shift away from the humanities. We've seen this in all aspects from elementary school all the way up of they don't want to teach humanities. They don't want to teach the arts. The arts have been cut. Music class has been cut. Literature class has been cut. All this stuff, right? And they start pushing STEM, study STEM, science, technician, mathematics, and stuff like that. But more than that, it's this business class. They're trying to socially reproduce this new business class to create complex system managers, the people that can cook the books, the people that know the tax law, the people that know how to write the code for the banking system, the people that can manage the mid-level aspects of the corporation. The people that are going to go into school for that shit, that's who's going to get selected. The people already coming from the complex system manager class or the upper class or the ruling class. And that's terrifying because you're socially reproducing a beehive of people that do not think or act for themselves. They have been cookie cuttered. They have been socially engineered never to question the system, just to operate the system as efficiently as possible. That's some real dystopic shit, and it's fucking terrifying. Going on with the actual reading here, we've got Freeman was born in 1904 in Vienna, Austria, and emigrated to the United States after the rise of Hitler. An economist who became a longtime fixture in conservative politics, he served on the White House staff during both the Dwight Eisenhower and Richard Nixon administrations. In 1970, he was seconded from the Nixon administration to work on Reagan's campaign. He was also a senior fellow at Stanford's conservative Hoover Institution. In one of his books, he asked, "Can Western civilization survive?" Don't like the look of that. What he believed to be excessive government spending on education, Social Security, etc. That's funny. So this guy, it says here, alludes to the fact that he left Vienna, Austria after the rise of Hitler. Okay, so why are you bringing the Hitler-esque politics here to the United States if that's what you're fucking running from? I mean, were you running from it, or were you bringing the ideology here and planting seeds for it, where you knew it would be fertile enough to grow because we live in a fucking right-wing reactionary society? I don't know. The guy sounds like a fascist to me. Can Western civilization survive? Conservative politics, I mean, you just had to bring it here, didn't you, buddy? Let's do some more reading here. A core theme of Reagan's first gubernatorial campaign in 1966 was resentment toward California's public colleges, in particular UC Berkeley, with Reagan repeatedly vowing to clean up the mess, quote unquote, there. Berkeley, then nearly free to attend California residents, had become a national center of organizing against the Vietnam War, which is what we were talking about there. Deep anxiety about this reached the highest levels of the U.S. government. John McCone, the head of the CIA, requested a meeting with J. Edgar Hoover, head of the FBI, to discuss communist influence, terrifying, at Berkeley, a situation that definitely required some corrective action, quote unquote. Some things in there too. So you've got Reagan, you've got this Freeman guy, you've got all these guys in the top echelon of American society, including members of the CIA meeting with the FBI. There was a time when we actually had a real left in this country that understood the nature of the intelligence community, and they were terrified of it, and they realized that it was their natural class enemy. And you've got liberals now just bending over backwards with joy over the FBI. I remember when Trump was in office and Trump said some remark about the CIA, and then every liberal across America went on the defensive of the CIA. Bitch, it's the CI fucking A and the FBI. Are you not aware of the fucking torrent of hell that they've unleashed on working people in this country over the years, and how they've stifled every fucking civil rights or social or economic movement or anti-war movement in this country? The disconnect with these people is fucking real. I mean, these people are your goddamn enemy, man. They're the deep state. They are a tripartite state that has absolutely no, checks and balances on it. It's an extra national organization that pushes militantly the interests of the ruling class, of the business class, at your expense. It's just crazy. It's just crazy to me. Obviously they've completely hidden that entire history of all the coups that the CIA has done all over the fucking world, of the meddling and espionage that the FBI has done against various left-leaning organizations in the U.S., including the Black Panthers. I mean, it's just wild to me to see them lauding it on social media. It's disgusting. And the last thing I want to touch on in this segment here, too, is this last part of the quote. CIA requested a meeting with J. Edgar Hoover, head of the FBI, to discuss, quote-unquote, communist influence at Berkeley, a situation that, quote-unquote, definitely required some corrective action. I just want to make a little anecdote here. Any time, whether you're a liberal or whatever the fuck you are on the spectrum, if you're somehow watching the show, anytime the government or the intelligence community or the military starts talking about the evil communists and we got to stop them, you can bet your ass they're about to take something away from you. Because every single time they start talking about the communist menace, the specter of communism whooping your child's mind, critical race theory, every time they start talking about that kind of shit, they're going to take something away from you. They're going to defund your education. They're going to take away your rights, something. They're going to do something. And you think maybe people will pick up on that now, but we live in an incredibly propagandized society. One of the biggest propaganda machines in history, and it's fucking effective. Just a little footnote here for you. Let's do some more reading here. It says, during the 1966 campaign, Reagan regularly communicated with the FBI about its concerns about Clark Kerr, the president of the entire University of California system. Despite requests, quote-unquote, requests, real polite, from Hoover, Kerr had not cracked down on Berkeley protesters. Within weeks of Reagan taking office, Kerr was fired. A subsequent FBI memo stated that Reagan was dedicated to the destruction of disruptive elements on California campuses. What about the freedom of speech? Maybe that's why Kerr wasn't doing anything about it. Okay, isn't that one of the reasons why we should be sending kids to fucking college, is so that they learn to be concerned citizens of democracy, like we already talked about? Do they not have a right to protest when they're not in class? Ain't that what America's about? Apparently fucking not, right? But guys, this is what the Red Scare has done, man. You see how Reagan was talking with the FBI. They're all, colluding together in their smoke-filled rooms about what the fuck are we going to do about these hippies and communists. This is what the Red Scare has done, relating back to what I just said about anytime they're talking about communists, they're about to take something the fuck away from you. Okay? They have used the excuse of the Red Scare, the scare of communism, the fear of socialism. They've baked it into your brain so that they can hollow out every institution in the society. From the elected positions of representatives and senators to the administrative appointments like here at the colleges, to the community that you live in, to your church, to everything. They have used it to hollow it out of every single human being that actually gives a fuck about other human beings, or has a vision of creating a better society that's more just or more egalitarian. They have used the fear of communism that they have baked into your head, the fear of socialism, to take everything away from you that existed in your liberal democracy. They have completely hollowed out, anesthetized any semblance of liberal democracy in this country. It no longer exists. And they use the Red Scare to do that. And how people don't see it is fucking beyond me, man. Let's read some more here. It says, Reagan pushed to cut state funding for California's public colleges, but did not reveal his ideological motivation. Rather, he said, the state simply needed to save money. And that's another piece of rhetoric you're going to hear. That's another piece of rhetoric they use to fucking take everything away from you, to hollow out society, to make it non-functional. We got to save money. We got to fucking save money. This is the same excuse they use to privatize it. They'll cut the money, then the shit don't work, be it the post office or the public schools. They cut the money from it. It doesn't work as effectively as it once was. Then you're pissed. Then they come in with the fucking solution. Oh, we'll privatize it. We'll give it to a private corporation. We'll let a private corporation educate our kids. We'll let a private corporation deal with your healthcare costs because they have a profit incentives, which mean they'll be accountable. They're accountable by the free market. If they don't do a good job, then you won't go to them. as if they weren't fucking in bed with the government, and the government ensures that these monopolies have the power to make sure that there is no fucking competition. So you get your big pharma, you get your big insurance, you get your big charter school, right? This is how it fucking works. Says, to cover the funding shortfall, Reagan suggested that California public colleges could charge residents tuition for the first time. This, he complained, resulted in the almost hysterical charge that this would deny educational opportunities to those of the most moderate means. This is obviously untrue. ... We made it plain that tuition must be accompanied by adequate loans to be paid back after graduation. So we got a lot of stuff here too as well I want to talk about. So this is where the tuition comes from. This isn't something that ever really existed in American history or even other Western countries. I mean, every fucking Western country, including the United States for the majority of its history, had the concept that we need educated people to run the society and to help elect people to make the decisions. It's the fundamental idea behind liberal democracy. Now, we can have an argument or a discussion about liberal democracy being a lie. I lend to that fucking camp as well. But regardless, it needs to have some semblance of liberal democracy in order to function, and you need educated people to do that. Okay? This never existed until Reagan. The debt never... This isn't normal. No one ever had the idea that you had to pay out of pocket to be educated so you could be a functioning member of society. That's a new fucking concept, less than 40 years old. But it's been so normalized, it's fucking insane. And I love this quote here too. Resulted in the almost hysterical charge that this would deny educational opportunities to those of the most moderate means. It was the people saying that were a bunch of lunatics that wanted free shit. They were hysterical. They're stupid. Look where we are now. How many millions of people in this country have foregone going to college or continuing college in order to get the career that they needed? Which, mind you, the career that our fucking society needs, doctors, teachers. We've seen a huge teacher shortage in many states and cities throughout the country. Engineers, coders. We have a shortfall of all this stuff. We need it. I mean, this is the thing. It's like I was saying, it's a needed aspect of society to have educated people that understand how to function in government and in civics, but also that know how to function in the roles that society needs. We need teachers, we need doctors, we need caregivers, we need all this stuff. You know? And how many millions have foregone that? How much wasted talent is there? I mean, myself included. I went to college. I put myself painstakingly through college, doing all of it online, 60 out of 66 credits online to get my my associates in arts. So I could go on to get my bachelor's was the idea. I had a fucking newborn. I was working full-time, 50 to 60 hours a week at a steel door and frame plant called Curry's. I didn't have a car, so I rode my bike. So my day would start at 3 a.m. I'd ride my bike to work, rain, sleet, snow, sub-zero temperatures, the 1 mile to work, pulling myself up by the fucking bootstraps, right? Freezing my dick off, and then I'd work there in excruciatingly terrible fucking working conditions for 10 hours. And then I'd ride my bike. I had a little cocoon on the back of it to pick my kid up from daycare. In the winter, I'd have to do this too, and I'd bundle her up in like 16 fucking blankets and like put a tarp over and shit. And then I'd ride home, I'd change her ass, get her bathed, feed her, and then I'd be sitting with her on my lap like this while I'm fucking taking notes for the exam that week. And I did that for 2 or 3 years. And I did all that with the intention of going on to get my bachelor's, but I got so burned out. And I realized I was going to have to pay all this fucking tuition and debt because the grants were out. And I'd be stuck with $20,000 or $30,000 in debt just for my BA, going through another 3 years of busting my dick into the dirt. I didn't have it in me. For what? For a teaching job that nobody seems to give a fuck about anymore and they pay starvation wages for. And that's my story. And how many millions more are there? You know, it's insane to me. And, here we are. This is obviously untrue. We made it plain that tuition must be accompanied by adequate loans to be paid back after graduation. But nobody can pay them back, And, this has had a double advantage for the ruling class as well, because now not only are you keeping the majority of people ill-educated, and the ones that you do educate, all they are is they're not citizens, they're consumers, and they're complex system managers like we talked about. Now all those workers that are already ill-educated and don't know shit about the system, therefore they can't rise against the system, they're also saddled with an indiscriminately large amount of debt that can't be gotten rid of through bankruptcy because of Joe Biden. Thank you very much, sir. So you have this double whammy of oppression on the working class, massive debt, and a lack of education, so they can't function in society. Talk about a fucking win-win for the working class, or for the ruling class, right? Let's get this reading going here a little bit, guys. Try to finish it up. It says, the success of Reagan's attacks on California public colleges inspired conservative politicians across the U.S. Nixon decried campus revolt, quote-unquote. Spiro Agnew, his vice president, proclaimed that thanks to open admissions policies, unqualified students are being swept into college on the wave of new socialism. See, it's all the root of it. Because they don't want an educated working class. Because the educated working class is going to understand they're being fucked. Prominent conservative intellectuals also took up the charge. Privately, one worried that free education may be producing a positively dangerous class situation by raising the expectations of working class students. Another referred to college students as a parasite feeding on the rest of society, who exhibited a failure to understand and to appreciate the crucial role played by the reward-punishment structure of the market. The answer was to close off the parasitic option. These are the people that cooked up the idea of making you pay tuition for college. May be producing a positively dangerous class situation by raising expectations of working class students. I mean, like I've already said a half dozen times now. They don't want you to expect a better society. They don't want you to envision a better society. And when you get educated and you understand how the system works and you understand how different societies around the world work and have worked certain aspects out better, you start to say, fuck this shit. And your expectations get higher. Your expectation of a human society gets better. And so you fight against it. And that's the last fucking thing they want. Calling students parasites. That's calling the educated people in your society fucking parasites. The people that are going to take their civic duties seriously. They're going to understand the system, parasites. Not the ruling class, not the people charging the exorbitant interest on the loans, not the bankers that crash the economy every fucking 10 years. None of those people are parasites. Students trying to be educated so they can be better members of society, both economically and civically, are parasites. These are the people that cook that up. It's fucking wild. Let's go on with this here, guys. It says, in practice, this meant to the National Review a system of full tuition charges supplemented by loans which students must repay out of their future incomes. In retrospect, this period was a clear turning point in America's policies towards higher education. For decades, there had been enthusiastic bipartisan agreement that states should fund high-quality public colleges so that their youth could receive higher education for free or nearly so. That has now vanished. In 1968, California residents paid a $300 yearly fee to attend Berkeley, the equivalent of about $2,000 now. Now tuition at Berkeley is $15,000, with total yearly student costs reaching almost $40,000. In 40 years, that's what we've had, 40 to 50 years. It's grown that much. And then we wonder why our society is so divided and so fucking sick and can't get anything done. Because you put a paywall in front of being educated. Student debt, which had played a minor role in American life through the 1960s, increased during the Reagan administration and then shot up after the 2007 to 2009 Great Recession as states made huge cuts to funding for their college systems. So it just gets worse and worse. It's getting worse and worse to the point nobody will even think about going to college because they won't have it. There's no way. That brings us to today. Biden's actions, while positive, are merely a band-aid on a crisis 50 years in the making. In 1822, founding father James Madison wrote to a friend that though liberal appropriations made by the legislature of Kentucky for a general system of education cannot be too much applauded, enlightened patriotism is now providing for the state a plan of education embracing every class of citizens. There's James Madison for our right-wing conservative reactionaries listening to the show. They wanted free education too, you fucking idiots. Knowledge will forever govern ignorance, Madison explained, and a people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power which knowledge gives. Hard to do when you put $40,000 a year in order to get that education in front of it. Freeman and Reagan and their compatriots agreed with Madison's perspective, but wanted to prevent Americans from gaining this power. If we want to take another path, the U.S. will have to recover a vision of a well-educated populace, not as a terrible threat, but a positive force that makes the nation better for everyone, and so should largely be paid for by all of us. There you have it. They want to be educated. They want to educate the people they educate to be the complex system managers and the rulers over everybody else. And that does not include you, and it does not include your children. Your children get to flip burgers and do this and that, but they don't get to have a say in the society because they're too fucking stupid. Because they want them to be too fucking stupid. They want them to be so stupid that you know how to press the buttons and write the number on the thing, but you don't know how to vote for somebody that ain't gonna fuck you over. Or you don't know how to get in the streets and fight for your shit. Or they brainwash you to believe that unions are bad. And they're trying to take your money while the other people that actually is taking your money is taking all your money. And putting you in debt because you want to give your kids a better life. Wake up, man. It's a nation of idiots, man. It's a nation of idiots. And I'm sorry if you're in that camp, but Jesus Christ. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much all the reading here I have for you. I wanted to read this for you and break down some of this article and have a discussion about it because it's incredibly important. I mean, we are seeing the United States, which was already a right-wing reactionary society, become increasingly more so, dangerously so on the global stage. I mean, the right-wing reactionaryism has always been an issue in the U.S., especially if you are a person of color. But that level of danger is blowing up to a global scale that, I mean, we've already seen the U.S. empire do such atrocious things, but as it continues to weaken and fray at the edges and its ruling class fears losing its hegemony, that reactionary attitude that is prevalent amongst the working class and has only gotten worse because they're even less educated than before is going to be weaponized to do horrible things. Atrocities that I don't even think we can give word to, you know. And this political polarization and this increase in reactionaryism, as we've said, is a direct result of putting this pay barrier in front of college education. It's a direct result of coupling that lack of education with a massive propaganda machine that makes people believe lies and fills their head with hate and consumerism and ugliness of every single shade. And you put all these things together and you come out with a fucking hideous, brain-dead, amorphous society that is now the present-day American culture. And it's terrifying. And so I wanted to talk about this article and do some analysis on it to hopefully give a greater understanding of how this student loan debt crisis isn't just a footnote in the history of the class war. It's one of the biggest aspects of it. And to show exactly how these State Department stooges, these corrupt politicians like Reagan with the intelligence community, had a cognitive plan of action for battle in the class war, for this particular educational battle in the class war, directed it against you, directed against your coworkers, your neighbors, and your children and your children's children. It's war. It's a battle in the war, and they've been extremely fucking successful, and we're here 50 years later dealing with the consequences. and we have neoliberal fuckheads like Joe Biden pushing out $10,000 in student debt relief, which is a drop in the bucket, so that they can get votes. It's what this is about, so that hopefully you vote for them in the midterms. And it also serves as a way of, we can end this discussion now because we did something about it. And I don't want anybody listening to this show to fall for that. We got to keep fighting for it. We got to keep pushing for it. Debt strike, namely, because no matter who we elect, they're not going to do shit against them. The system's so well oiled, so well managed by those complex system managers that unless we go on a debt strike in conjunction with a general strike, what's it going to do? But yeah, guys, as I said, that's all I have for you. Drop a comment. Let me know what you think about this. Drop a comment if you have any more information related to this analysis. Let me know if you thought my analysis was on point, if you want to add anything to it, to the discussion. It's always greatly appreciated. Sometimes you guys drop some really great comments that help me better understand what I've been talking about. So drop a comment, ring the bell, support me on Patreon if you can. I'd greatly appreciate it. And as always, guys, it's great hanging out with you. I love you very much, and I'll speak to you again soon. Bye. And I know